Hello students, welcome back to PG Pathshala. Now almost we are reaching at the end of our Women's Studies paper, and before we start our topic which is on women and civil society, I want to just reintroduce myself. I am Shaini Das, assistant professor, and I have just brought many of the topics before, so also you have just went through some other presenters topics, and I hope that you enjoyed all the topics very much, as well as you learn to apply the knowledge that you have gained from the topics, because women's studies is a very applicable subject, and your knowledge and skills are more important, because only by knowledge and skills you can make change, bring gender equality and women empowerment. Now let us get back to our topic of today, which is called women and civil society. Let me define what is civil society. According to the United Nations, civil society is the third sector of society, along with government and business. It comprises civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations. A civil society is comprised of groups or organizations working in the interest of the citizens but operating outside of the governmental and for-profit sectors, that is business sectors. Organizations and institutions that make up civil society include labor unions, non-profit organizations, villages and other service agencies that provide an important service to society without or with very little in return. Civil society is sometimes referred to as the civil sector, a term that is used to differentiate it from other sectors that comprise the functioning of a society. For example, the three sectors of society that we know present in our society are the public sector, which is the government and its branches. Second, the private sector, which includes businesses and corporations. And third, the civil sector, which includes the organizations that act in the public's interest but are not motivated by private profit making or government public activities. Since women members of the society are primarily engaged in the unorganized and non-profit sector, civil society is a best representation of their struggles for rights and collective voice, capability and strength. Therefore, women and civil society are very connected. Women's roles and participation in civil society. Therefore, women's role and participation in civil society is a major achievement, an achievement that initiated and gave thrust to women's movement against patriarchal domination and subjugation, towards gender justice based on equality and equity principles, and women empowerment as human capital and agency. So civil society, in fact, been really argued and debated among academicians. Numerous academics and practitioners of civil society have offered definitions for civil society based on their research and experiences. The most commonly used definition was created by Civicus, which conceives of civil society as the arena outside the family, the state and the market, which is created by individual and collective actions, organizations and institutions to advance shared interest. This definition has been widely accepted in different platforms, since the definition represents civil society in its ongoing evolution, growing problems and diversity of identities. A proposed definition that captures its current form is an ecosystem of organized and organic social and cultural relations existing in the space between the state, business and family, which builds on indigenous and external knowledge, values, traditions and principles to foster collaboration. Also, the achievement of specific goals by and among citizens and other stakeholders. Stakeholders are those who are beneficiaries of civil society actions. Civil society within this context comprises qualities associated with goals, relationships, contextual experiences, values, and informal and formal structures. In recent times, the different typologies of civil society are given as below. 1. Civil society organizations or CSOs comprise faith-based organizations or religious organizations and community-based organizations that have an organized structure and mission and are typically registered entities and groups. Civil society organizations can also be non-governmental organizations. Non-governmental organizations provide assistance to people for little or no fee. NGOs fall into the category of civil society because they are not operated by the government, are very often reliant on donations from the government or international agencies, and tend to be comprised of volunteers who do not wait for the payment or daily wages or salary. Another example of civil society at work is civic groups, such as the clubs, associations, networks, like we know many of the times Rotary Club. These clubs are also part of the civic society organizations. Online groups and activities including social media communities that can be organized but do not necessarily have physical, legal or financial structures. Especially in the modern digital economy, social media plays an important role as a civic society organization. Social movements or collective action and or identity which can be online or physical in existence are also part of the civil society organization. Labor unions, labor organizations representing workers and their needs and interests. Social entrepreneurs employing innovative and or market-oriented approaches for socially and environmentally responsible outcomes are also part of the civic society organization. Family may also be considered as a civil society group as it voluntarily contributes to well-being without expectation of any return. So in this definition, we can understand that civil society is not just the only or one typical type, but it is represented in a various and diverse way of life. These organizations are structures on its own and they have different actions and formations. Let us now look into emergence of civil society in India. How civil society emerged in India. Civil society in India emerged in the era of Indian National Congress leadership in freedom struggle to create a nation state in the post-colonial period of democratic functioning and establishment of a welfare state in order to create an Indian model of development which is based on equality of all citizens irrespective of caste, class, ethnicity, religion, gender and other socio-cultural, economic, political, subaltern divisions. Another reason for the emergence of civil society in post-colonial India was a direct response to 1960s drought and famine and 1975 national emergency during the political regime of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. This led to mass alienation from the authoritarian state. This national crisis gave birth to the emergence of voluntary organizations aimed to protect the civil liberties of citizens. Social movements emerged as organized civil society shaped up in different forms to protect different identities of the people, resolve their different issues, safeguard their different needs and interests of the diversity of Indian populations. These movements historically represented social reform movements, women's emancipation, feminist activism, grassroots environmental and livelihoods protection, alternative income generation, right to education and information, cleanliness and saving girl child in the contemporary society. These social movements marked the turning point to situate non-governmental or voluntary organizations in macro level policy making in a democratic Indian society. Before civil society, it was recognized only the government makes the policy, but after the emergence of the civil society, even they have been included as a part of the policy making because of their grassroots representation. Post-colonial India witnessed the emergence of a wide range of NGOs, including those that emerged to remove the chronic levels of poverty that had resulted in the famine and drought of the mid-1960s in India. Moreover, a number of NGOs mushroomed in the post-emergency period to protect the civil liberties of people and to advocate for human rights. In this section, we will look into the growth trajectory of NGOs in post-colonial India and then move to the emergence of voluntary organizations that rose as a direct result of people's distrust of the state in the post-emergency period, leading many to form associations to protect civil liberties and human rights. While many NGOs, the government and policymakers in the 1960s and 70s worked together to achieve the basic needs of the poor. But during the 1970s and 1980s, the era saw the emergence of the mantra of participatory development amongst development planners. That means the development that is participated by the stakeholders or the beneficiaries. The reasons behind this were the large-scale dissatisfaction with centrally planned development strategies. This failed to reach the intended beneficiaries, firstly due to the excessive emphasis on the creating large industries that was characteristic of the initial first and second 5-year plans, and then the failure of the trickle-down theory, which led to the realization that development below had greater chances of being connected with people's needs and realities. This is what there was a shift of development paradigm from top-bottom approach to bottom-up approach. During this period, there was an increase in the interaction of NGOs with international funding agencies, like who started dictating the course of India's development within the new socio-political climate in the globalized world. International agencies such as the United Nations Development Programme and the World Bank, which initially worked with the government and its agencies, have extended funding, partnership and collaboration with NGOs for successful project implementation. Indian citizens have been subject to not only poor centralized planning but also corrupt leadership and bad governance, resulting widespread and endemic violation of human rights and basic needs for survival. Decentralized NGOs are expected by these international and multilateral organizations to play a larger role by transforming realities in remote corners of the country where government could not reach. The post-liberalization phase synergized market-based economic reforms with the notion of good governance, that is governance characterized by transparent, accountable and participatory decision making. At this juncture, increasing roles were shifted from governmental actions to civil society organizations. Example, development and right-based NGOs started cropping up as per international funding agencies' perceptions that these NGOs are more efficient, capable, committed and accountable than the autonomous and all-powerful state machineries. Indian society is heterogeneous and diversity of culture, religion, ethnicity, and therefore this plural diversity marked by a wide variety of ethnic, religious, regional and linguistic groups. Civil society in India as a result is a public space of contestation between these different identities, between individual and state, and between elite and poor. According to Alam, Most people in India have only nominal rights and even less of a capacity to seek or even have access to the public sphere. Though they are not qualified in terms of being able to fully use their freedom of expression, yet they wanted to be part of the public sphere by making rational demands to the state, which they do not, however, have the ability to engage within a sustained manner. Fortunately, civil society is given that space for the people of India. Civil society's success therefore depends on the broad extent to which it has been able to develop the disempowered common men and women of India to empowered citizens, breaking out of traditional social norms and practices. Now let's look at the role and participation of women in civil society. In a patriarchal society like India, where the male head of the family centralizes all power of control and authority to make decisions for the family and its female members of all age groups, gender issues will obviously be the problem. Therefore, gender issue is still remain as a unique problem within the vicious cycle of socio-economic political hierarchy. According to 2011 census, the sex ratio in India is shockingly skewed at 940 female per 1000 males, while it is 946 in rural India and 900 in urban India. Moreover, inequalities stemming from a patriarchal society, though manifested deeply in the private domain, but do spill over into the public domain, embodying female members of the society as less valued and attach less significance to their roles and contributions inside family and outside communities or larger societies. This results in inequalities and differential treatment towards girls and women by men folks across generations. This differential treatment across generations have created intensive and extensive problems for women in India today, like sex ratio, lack of education, dowry, child marriage, child trafficking, rape, exploitation, wage gaps, compensations, poverty, poor health and sanitation, violence against women, and many other latent infestations. In this precarious Indian social condition, civil society has given the other half of the population the right to struggle for freedom by breaking gender stereotypes and stigma, by collectively representing their common concerns and problems, by organizing into activism and movements to protect their needs and interests, and by broadening solidarity within themselves and outside communities and cultures through participation in real context or through social media. Livelihood movement like Narmada Bachao Andolan and Chipko movement, domestic violence movements like anti-Arab movement, women's representation like Uniform Civil Code and the reservation of seats for women in parliament and state legislatures, alternative income and microcredit generation like entrepreneurship and self-employment have been possible only through women's collectives under civil society organizations like community-based organizations and self-help groups. So in present context, NGOs, community-based organizations or CBOs and self-help groups or SHGs are the main paramount facilitator of women and civil society engagement. Although both the state and the voluntary organizations have not worked sufficiently enough to sensitize citizens about the importance of protecting the girl child and empowering women. Therefore, India still has a wide gender gap. As far as the state is concerned, it is due to political patriarchy that rules in the center or in the state, which safeguards the interest of the Indian men and do not want to disrupt or challenge the traditional social conditions by giving privileges to women citizens. Why? Because of the fear of losing mass vote bank, which is men but not women. Therefore, Indian governmental schemes are tokenistic in approach to women's development than an integrative approach towards gender development. As per voluntary organizations are concerned, it is partly due to their financial dependence on international funding agencies and their preferred choice of development in India in midst of world trade politics. Most of these funding agencies consider women as only a component in development, so that there is a rational precondition for spending of international aid and continuance of debt collection developed country from developing or underdeveloped country. None of this reasoning can be excused though, and officially or unofficially more active and conspicuous roles should be adopted. It should be supported too for implementation to make sure that the girl child and prospective women in her life course receives right environment for her growth and development, and thereby resulting in national economic growth and development, be it in the form of grassroots movements that emphasize on the rights of people, or advocacy groups that focus on public policy, or even the form of removing laws that violate the basic rights of people. The state has to be more alert and responsive to the needs of the ordinary citizens or the common man or woman, in the words of R.K. Lakshman. While civil society needs to be an alert watchdog that monitors government functioning and empowers citizens and develop their capacities to help meet their own needs and aspirations instead of relying solely on the state. In summary, let us understand that civil society is a sphere between the family and the state. Civil society is an institution in itself. Civil society is the third sector or sphere, and the other two being the state and the market. As per the definition of civil society, it is referred to those institutions that are directed neither by power motive nor by profit motive. It is a space which is predominantly guided by the common good of the society, and that is motivated by service and well-being of the other. How civil society can lead to women empowerment is what women empowerment defines as. It is not about the getting educated, it is not about finding a job, it is not about challenging patriarchy or becoming economically independent. It is most importantly to pursue what a woman wishes in her life, separate from her family and as an individual. This socio-economic and politically together leads to women empowerment. The life stories of many Indian girls and women show their incredible courage and how they lead a dignified life in the face of patriarchal control and cultural stigma. Therefore, women and civil society are integrated together because civil society needs stakeholders who women are, and women need civil society as a support mechanism. Hope you understood the topic, and you will be also part of organic civil society to bring change. Thank you.